Welcome to Go Learning Point tutorial. So in our last session we talked about in and exist operator in Oracle. So in this session we will be covering not in and not exist operator and what are the differences between those two operators and when which operator will be used. Okay, so before discussing about not in and not exist operator, we'll see that how null value is going to be used in both the cases while using not in and exist operator. So if my subquery is returning a null value, in that case how not in is going to perform, and in case my subquery is returning a null value, in that case how not exist is going to perform. So if we talk about a null value, null is what? Null is undefined value. So we cannot compare null with any other value. Okay, this cannot be compared, and not even with null value. You cannot just compare null where null equal to null. Okay, so if null equal to null, that is going to give you a false result. Okay, so this cannot be compared with any other value. Not even with null value. So in case I have outer query, that will be our main query, and if I have a subquery or list of values, or out of those list of values I have a null value, I have provided a null comma separated values, and then somewhere I have provided a null value and I have provided a subquery. So in case of not in or not exist operator, so I'll be providing either value or a subquery. So if my subquery is returning a null value, in that case how these two operators are going to perform. So one of the difference, if we think about not in and not exist operator, so that means we talked about the in and exist. So in is directly working on the actual values returning from the subquery, or the actual values that we have provided comma separated inside the clause, inside the in query. So where we are providing subquery, then in that case the same applies to here as well. In not in, we can directly provide values and we can provide subquery as well. Okay, so in case of not in, the not in is going to work on the actual values returning from the subquery, whereas the not exist will perform in a similar way that exist works. So not exist is going to return a boolean value, that will be a true, false, or 0, 1. So now in case I have a query like select strict from my table 1, where column 1 from table 1 in 10 comma 20 comma, then I have given null value. So this is not in, so this is not going to work. So in this case, even if we have matching column 1, even if we have value 10 or 20 in column 1, this is not going to return any row, because we have a null value, and this is going to compare column 1 values with null value. That will return false, that will return no rows. Okay, so but in case what will happen in case of exist or not exist operator, so as we have already discussed that not exist operator is going to return a boolean value. So when this will compare col1 with this null value, this is going to return a false. Okay, so that will not return a null value. So in case of exist operator, this is going to return the actual value that we want to see in our result set. So in case if we have, so in not exist we will be using a subquery. So in this case, if even if we are using a subquery and that subquery is returning a null value, this not in operator is going to fail. Select col1 from T2. So even if we have a subquery used in not in clause, not in subquery, if this subquery, if the column 1 from T2 table is having any null value, then this query is not going to return any row, even if the rows are matching. But in case of exist operator, so if we have this subquery written here, and this will become not exist. And we have to provide condition as well, that we have already discussed. T1 dot col1 equal to t2 dot col1. So this is going to return me, this is going to compare the column from the table 1 with the column of table 2. So even if the table 2 column is having null value, this is going to return. So if it will compare this value with null from the T2 table, this query is going to return a boolean value that will be false. Okay. So in case we have, in case we know that our subquery is going to return null values, okay, it could be a single value or multiple values. So in that case, it is recommended to use not exist operator, because in that case is not going to work. So to make it work, in case even if you want to use not in operator, then we have to specify a condition where this column is not null. But that is not recommended, so it's better to use not exist operator. So the point is, null doesn't have ability to compare null values. So not in clause, sorry, not in does not have ability to compare null values. So the exception is where you have a null value in not in subquery. Then in that case, not in is not going to return any number of records. So it will always be false. That means it will not be going to return any number of rows, even if the columns are matching. Okay, so in such cases, not exist operator is what we have in Oracle that is recommended. Now, the next difference that we have in not in and not exist operator, that when using not in operator, the query performs a nested full table scan. Whereas if you're using a not exist operator is going to use an index within a subquery. So if we have used a subquery, we will be providing a join condition as well. So this is going to perform an index within the subquery. So when using not in, the query performs a nested full table scan. While using not exist, the subquery is going to perform index scan. Okay, so let's see how these two operators, not in and not exist, works practically. So we'll take an example of few tables, and then we will see how these are going to work in Oracle. Now let's take an example of this table where we have columns ID, name, salary, commission, manager ID, manager name, address, department ID, department name, order number, order status. Okay, so if we think about these two columns, ID and manager, and if we think about a query, so if you want to find out so list employees who are not manager. So what would be my query in case I want to perform this using not in? So using not in, select everything from my table. Well, so I want to list employees who are not managers. So based on the ID and manager ID column, I can identify that who are the employees already have the manager ID and manager ID column. So in that case, I will have the result set, and I can list the employees who are not manager. So where ID not in, select manager ID. So if I think about this query, this is going to compare ID with manager ID column. So if we see in ID, the first of all we have 101. This is going to compare it here. It will not find the 101 record here. So that means the 101 is not a manager. Then if we talk about 102, this will compare it with here for 102. So 102, we have a 102 ID manager ID column. So that means he is a manager. The 10 ID, the employee who is having 101 102 ID is a manager. Okay, but if you see, we talked about the null values, how not in and not exist operator treats a null value. Null cannot be compared with any other value, and not even with another null. Okay, so when I'll talk about the first ID 101, this is going to compare it with each values that we have in manager ID. So at this point, this is going to compare this 101 with null value, and that is going to return false. Okay, so logically we should be seeing the matching records where ID equal to manager ID. So let's try to execute this if this is going to work or not. So if you see, we have not received any number of records. Why? That is because we have null values in our subquery column. So in this manager ID, we have a null value. To make it work, we either have to specify where manager ID is not null, or in such cases, it is recommended to use not exist operator. So let's try to use not exist operator instead of not in. Okay, so what will be my query? Here it will be not exist. And select a boolean value 0, 1 or true, false. Select one from this table. I can just give it a name because we have to provide a condition as well while using exist or not exist operator. So where t2 dot manager id equal to t1 dot id. So wherever it will find a match between the subquery and the outer query, this is going to return me the result set. Okay, so id will not come here where not exists. So let's try to execute this query with not exist operator and see if this is going to return the expected result or not. So what is our expectation? That is going to compare each value from the ID column with each value with the manager ID. So in case of not exist operator, if this is going to compare this ID value with this null value, this is going to return false value, not the actual null operator, null values. Sorry, null is not an operator. So this is going to compare this ID value with null value, and that is going to return a false value, because not exist is going to return a boolean value, either true or false. It's not going to return the actual value. So in such cases where we have in the subquery, if my subquery is returning null values, in that cases it is recommended to use not exist operator. So let's see if this is going to give the expected result or not. So if you see, we have the employee information who are not manager. So list the employees who are not manager. This will be our query using not exist operator. So if you want to perform this using not in operator, so we have to explicitly provide a condition here. So while using not in operator, and if your subquery, you're not sure that your subquery is going to return null values or not, so it is recommended to use not exist. Or if you don't have option to use not exist, then just provide an explicit condition where that column is not null. So where this particular column in the subquery is not null, so just exclude those null values. Okay, so now if you execute this column, this is going to give the same result that we have received from not exist operator. If you see, now it has worked. But still the performance wise, the not exist operator will be good, because not exist operator is directly going to work on boolean values and not with the actual values. So that means that in case of not exist operator, we don't need to care about if my subquery is returning null values or not. Okay, because we are providing a condition here, so wherever it will match, this is going to give me the expected result only. This is not going to compare null value, because wherever it will find this match manager ID equal to ID, in case of null, this is not going to find a match, this is going to return a false value. So I'll copy all these things in the video description link from where you can just copy it for your purpose. And Thanks for watching my tutorial, and like, share and subscribe to my channel to get more updates. If you have any questions and suggestions, you can just email, you can send me email to this email ID. If you want to go through some interview questions, so you can just go through this link. And thanks for watching my video. Thank you.